Good morning, everybody. Sorry, running a wee bit late. A few glitches at my end. Our tradespeople turn up and you're trying to get out of your house. It's a truck. So my apologies for that. A little bit late. Okay, just a couple of procedural things to get underway before we move to the report that's on our agenda today. So there are no apologies. All the panel is here. The first item is 24.10.1, and that is to confirm the minutes of the panel meeting held on 27th of June, 9th of July, 10th of September. I think that's it, isn't it? Yep, 10th of September. I'll move. Someone like a second, please. Second. All in favour? Aye. It's carried. Thank you. Okay. One that is out of the road. We will move now to item number 24.10.2. Is RC 240194. This is a properly convened meeting of the hearings panel, called for the purpose of hearing a resource application to undertake subdivision of 2 properties into 3 allotments in the rural resource area. I'd ask the Minute Secretary to report on proceedings to date.
All statutory requirements under Section 95 of the Resource Management Act have been complied with. The Section 42A report prepared by the Planning Officer has been circulated to address the service.
Thank you. The following procedure will be followed for the hearing. The panel may ask questions. Council's officers or its consultants will direct any questions, points, clarification through the chair, and the chair shall be deemed to be the person asking the questions. The applicant or the applicant's representatives will be invited to make submissions and present evidence. The Section 42A report writer will be invited to provide a right of reply following the hearing of evidence and submissions. The applicant will have a right of reply, but should not be permitted to again traverse the evidence nor raise new evidence. So before proceeding with the hearing, I'd ask that all parties appearing identify themselves. I'll start with the panel. We've got names in front of us there. Neil Gillespie, I'm the chair of the council hearings panel. Martin McPherson to my left, and Ian Cooney further to the left. Ian's special because he's got his full name on his code, on his ticket, and we've only got initials. I don't know what that is, because we've been here too long. That's the early version. The early version. And Karen, to my right, who is the person that glues this all together for us, and Rogers, who's our the advisor to the panel and the technical person we go to. Tim, whose last name I've forgotten, Anderson is the reporting officer, and
Dominic Carnan.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. That's right. I knew he fitted somewhere into it, but I only see him once a month. Right. And now the applicant. You introduce yourselves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Introduce myself. I'm Peter Klusterman. I'm a consultant planner for Quarter Surveying, representing the applicants, Sue and Lisa Hoskin.
Thank you, Peter. And I guess this must be
Sue Hoskin.
Sue and Lisa.
Lisa Hoskin.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Wow. Welcome, Peter. Good to see you. Been a while.
Right. Yep.
We'll go easy on you.
Well, no. And just so you know, it's a formal process, but you probably should have picked that on not too much into the formal stuff. I'll do the job we need to do and try to get the process correct, because Anne will pull me up if I don't. So we'll get it right. So now, can I ask for one of the panel to move that the Section 42A report be prepared by the planning officer be taken as read? Ian, seconded. Martin, all in favour? Aye. Carry. Right. Over to the applicant. Peter.
So we received and agree with the Section 42A report and the astute analysis by your reporting planner. There is one item which we wish to discuss, one condition of consent we'd like to explore with you and seek a change to. The recommendation or the condition of consent requires mains power to be connected to the boundary of the allotments. We have obtained quotes to do that and looked at alternatives. And the Minute Secretary, hopefully you have the quotations in front of you, and mains power is prohibitively expensive. And so we asked that, I think it's condition 17.
15, that's the draft.
Yes. So we asked that condition 15 is amended to allow the power supply to be by alternative means of solar power. Which, oh, you see, that the other two allotments already have power, so
And that's the proposal from Infinite Energy.
yes, yeah.
I'll take it from that. Otherwise, you're happy with everything that's been said.
Yes, yeah, agree with the findings to approve and agree with the conditions of consent bar that one just discussed.
Right. Trying to make our job simple. Thank you. But so we're in a rural resource area, and the allotment sizes that are proposed is 1.92 hectares, 4.09 and 3.43. That's correct?
Yes, it says for that.
It's not the 42A report says, so I guess it should be right there. Which, if you take an average of 8 and a minimum of 2, in simple terms, gets nowhere near it.
That is true.
So I'd like to just, the concerns that gives to me is that we look at precedent, because in this particular area, this will be the first of that size that's that far away from what is permitted, and I'd be interested as to how you think from the applicant's perspective that say what happens to the next one and the next one and the next one, because the reality would be is that there's bound to be more to come if this goes through. So I'd really like to hear some thoughts about how that might be able to be worked through.
Yeah, certainly. So the point of difference between a size compliant subdivision and non-compliance, one which is not size compliant, you go from restricted discretionary to non-complying. Non-complying is not a prohibition. Each application is assessed on its merits. The nature of the property, there's an agreement in place to purchase an additional property of Mr. Lewis McGregor to aggregate up enough land to achieve, or as near as possible, the size requirement that the council desires. The property itself, in terms of productivity, it is quite a rocky and exposed site, which is really not capable of achieving much primary production. So that in itself is a further rationale for looking at this as a special or a unique case. So in terms of, how will it create a precedent? Well, each case law, and always loath to quote case law, but the courts have found that each case is assessed on its merit and doesn't necessarily create precedent.
It can create expectation.
Oh, certainly, but there is.
Yeah, I appreciate there's bound to be a legal difference, and the risk is that we the Royal find ourselves in court situations to try and work that through, and who knows how they turn out sometimes.
Yeah, that is true, but it is a point of difference. It is not a prohibition. Non-complying is exactly that. It's you assess this, and there will be other applications, I have no doubt. But you look at each case, you look at what is being proposed, you look at the uniqueness of the site, the ability to service, and then at that point it becomes a balancing exercise.
Yeah, Would it be fair to say that if I look at the adjoining properties, that the logic about the productivity that makes it special wouldn't be hard to apply to the rest of those blocks, or to take a bigger block next door to say, well, this is stuff that's not productive because it's mostly rocks and whatever, and that in itself then leads to a situation that, as you point out, is non-complying, and everyone's going to be put on its merits. But when the first one's there, then the precedent could be one that could be seen as done very early, and the question might be is that for this sort of activity is that might look at a bigger picture and say it could be a plan change situation, because while it's non-complying at those sizes, it doesn't meet the average, and it doesn't meet the minimum for at least one of the lots.
1.92.
Yeah, and then you look at the landscape and say, well, it's rural for a reason as well. And I think I guess what you're saying is that this is not the one that would be something that is going to be created precedent, and the special reasons that we could see to make it a consent we could grant as a non-complying activity are the lack of productivity and the rockiness, those sort of areas, and that it is a special case on that basis in the applicant's mind.
I haven't explored the allotment sizes to the left and to the right of the Hoskins property to see whether there is potential to, or whether, if they were to subdivide, would they be complying or would they be non-complying? Or sorry, would they be restricted, discretionary, and non-complying? So I haven't done a comprehensive assessment of adjoining or surrounding properties to see whether the likelihood of creating a precedent in this situation will occur. So I can't logically respond to that question.
It probably wasn't the most logical question. But I think you can see the challenge that as a panel, that and our bitter experience will tell us that we need to be mindful as we go through. And the first one's probably the most important one to get right. Otherwise the door becomes open and you have a situation that in the end, in our particular case it's Queensbury, where we got 8s into 4s and smaller, and you get to a stage, eventually you get to a tipping point. The key thing, lesson and learning out of that is to make sure that when you get the first one is that you get that right, to make sure that there's a clear case that says that the expectation of the neighbours and other people coming in to buy property, whatever, is clearly understood. Now, that's, you as the applicant shouldn't take that as being me saying this is wrong. Just making sure that we get this decision right, because otherwise it's wrong for a long time, and it's really important for us to consider that through.
Just speaking to the neighbouring properties, a lot of them do still have workable paddocks and farms, so they're quite separate geographically than our property as well. So
yeah,
this is very steep mostly and very rocky, gully, and big drop offs. And if you drive up McGregor Road, you'll see really rocky. There's one chamois living on the property at the moment.
How's that allowed?
I didn't invite him.
People can deal with it. Is it a pet?
No.
There's people that can deal with that. Just saying. Might get out of the sections a bit smaller. Cheeks. And could you just, it's in the application, could you just take me through what the plan is for what goes where, just to make sure that I've got that firmly in my mind and refresh what I've read in terms of what the 3 lots, what the proposals are for what gets done on which one and what's there on each one?
Yep, certainly. It's two, there's the Hoskins property and the adjoining property currently owned by Lewis McGregor, but with a sale and purchase upon successful subdivision application that it will be, the property transaction will be completed. So collectively that those 2 properties will then be subdivided into 3 separate parcels, 3 separate titles. And on 2 of them is building platforms have been defined.
Yep.
The building platforms are a product of, we went in with the initial application and there was some reservation by the planners in terms of visibility from primarily Chapman Road. So we employed a landscape architect and defined 2 building platforms which provided less visibility and therefore, achieved a better compliance with the expectation about skyline breaches and amenity values. So that accompanies the actual application itself. And based on that and the design and height of the buildings to be constructed, we've come up with a sort of a solution which the reporting planner finds acceptable in terms of achieving amenity. It is not an outstanding landscape. It's not significant amenity. It's just general rural landscape. So it's the lowest order of amenity to be realised. So that is fundamentally the application. And then there's the servicing requirements of water, power, on-site effluent disposal, which has all been explored and we found a solution.
And this takes me to water. So on the proposed lot 1, there's already an existing bore.
That's correct. Yes.
So the expectation would be is that all the 3 properties would have some interest in that bore.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. That you have quite a good source and volume and things like that. So there's sufficient supply to service 2 other households, and we'll put easements across as necessary to ensure that access.
And the water purifier that was installed is sufficient for a 3-house use as well when it was installed.
Yeah, and clearly environmental engineer has been through that information and seems to be happy enough that it can meet the requirements that we've got. Is that a creek that runs through it?
It comes from
Closar?
like dams, which are filled by, I think, water from Butcher's Dam. Yeah, and it seems to flow all year round. It's not a great volume. It's quite small, but
Is it flood?
No, it's a gully that 200 metres deep kind of thing. Yeah.
If it does, you don't see it.
It'd be really bad.
That's a good guess.
You can put a dam at the end of it. No, I shouldn't say that.
Says the dam builder.
just thinking out loud. Yeah, okay. All right. I still got the key thing for me will be to get my head around and making sure that the evidence and the application stacks up in terms of that issue around about the precedent and because it's probably one of the biggest departures I've seen. And as you say, it doesn't mean it can't be it's non-complying. It's not prohibited, so it can happen. But for me is to make sure that we can justify the significant departure.
Certainly.
Any questions?
You've covered it off. That was my biggest concern too.
Ian?
Was the neighbour to the north given the opportunity to provide affected party approval?
sorry, what was the last bit you said? Affected party.
Was the neighbour to the north given the opportunity to provide affected party approval?
At the bottom of the gully.
Is it
over the front.
The Maxwell?
Yeah. They informally they have no problem with it, but we didn't get them to sign off on it. But verbally they've when we've talked to them, they've had no issue with it.
But the only affected party approval that has been provided is McGregor.
McGregor on both sides.
We would expect Lewis to not agree.
So there's
They changed my team.
so I'm just looking on a map to just make sure I can work out where. Oh, that should be Neil across the road, not that one.
We had to read it to get them up to do. We could do that as well. They don't understand.
Okay.
Is it affected party approvals? There was no request, further information request seeking additional affected party approvals.
Probably a question we'll have with the section 42A report writer to work that through. Okay, so you basically got east and west,
Yes.
and that's not a criticism. Ian, that ask you a question, anything else? And
Points of clarification.
Yep,
That's
you
okay,
could,
Mr.
please.
Chairman. There appears to be a couple of houses on lot 2 already. Is that correct? And you're asking for an additional building platform?
There's a temporary house on lot 2.
It's a temporary house.
Yes.
There's a transportable house. Oh, it's actually in. Oh, yeah. Sorry.
It's
lot
just
two.
showing up on the map.
Yeah. So there's a
So-
shed up on the top, like a barn style shed, and then there's a what is it? A tiny house on wheels, which will be removed prior to occupation of the new site.
This here, what is that?
That's a shed.
That's shed,
There's a shed with a shipping container next to it.
and that's a house, is it, on the top?
Lot
No.
1?
I think we should.
On the hill? There, if there's something on the hill.
Let's
Sorry, can I
reside in
go?
a tiny house
Sorry.
on lot 1.
Terrible eyesight.
This here.
Yeah, that's a tiny house on wheels with a little garden shed next to it. So that will be removed.
Does that have services and building consent and all the rest of it?
It's like a temporary line over to it.
It's quite well established. It's got driveways and parking spaces.
It's just a gravel driveway that we've built.
That driveway was actually there when we bought the property because they had consent to build a shed where that tiny house was.
Yeah, so it was already
was
a building
never built.
platform.
Someone's living in it, I'm assuming.
Yes.
You don't have land use consent to live in it. Okay.
The situation is Lisa is residing in the tiny house and will be taking up one of the new titles to build her own house on, at which point that tiny house will be removed.
Which is included in that
Special condition.
conditions of consent.
Okay. The water supply, you've got something demonstrating that there is sufficient supply for the 3 houses from a Neil's or somebody that knows about capacity.
Yeah, there'll be a board log which will show.
That's not in this material that's been provided to council in terms of the sufficiency of the quantity of water. Is that,
Well, sorry, it is available. We can certainly get it to.
no, that's what I'm asking. My clarification is, do you have something that says there is sufficient water for 3 dwellings?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah, the assessment was done when it was dropped, when it was put in.
But not as part of this application. Okay. The other, just one more clarification, landscape, did it assess it from the state highway? Because this site's quite visible from the state highway rather than Chapman Road, because it's State Highway 8.
Trying to think where you're referring to.
Should drive to Alice to Roxburgh. There's a,
It's not, is it? Oh, well,
Well, you can certainly see Maxwell's and
there's a very small window that they can see our property, which is kind of near that little cottage on the highway. That's the only window that you can really see the property from State Highway 8.
and profile piles to put up to assess that.
They're still in place.
you can see it.
If you know when to look.
You've got to look at the exact right moment as you drive past, but yeah.
But Maxwell's is quite a lot higher than, you know, it is quite a lot higher. It's quite surprisingly higher.
Thank you. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, one of the things is that the panel hasn't undertaken a site visit, and we often think about whether we should do it before or after, and we've found it's mostly better to do it after
Yes.
when you know a bit more about it. Otherwise, you come in with a preconceived idea about something and you end up going down rabbit holes. So we find it quite. So don't be surprised if that's something I fully expect we're going to need to go and have a look.
I advise the applicants to expect that.
Okay. No other questions? Right. Respond to any matters raised and evidence, and whether you're still with your original recommendations, and then I've got some questions for you anyway.
Sure. Firstly, on the services, what's proposed is accepted. Mr. Harmon has had the opportunity to review that. In terms of the off-grid telecommunications was previously assessed. However, we hadn't previously had the opportunity to assess the proposal for off-grid electricity. That's something that was raised after I completed my report and formed part of the original application. Having discussed that with Dominic, we're satisfied that that's a feasible solution for Lot 3, and I will recommend changing the conditions accordingly to accommodate that. The remainder of services I consider acceptable, reliance of the advice of Mr. Hartman. In terms of effects on landscape and the appropriateness of building platform locations, I rely on the expert advice of Mr. Richard Tyler, which was included in the landscape assessment. Mr. Tyler has rated the effects accordingly in terms of landscape character and views and visual amenity, and on that basis I find that they were acceptable. Those effects were not more than minor or minor in terms of neighbours. Reason behind that is the chosen locations of the building platforms, which do not encroach on any currently opened areas of the site. They're within contained areas of topography and will not, in my opinion, discernibly affect any quality soils. In terms of the lot sizes, as discussed, they are smaller than what the district plan provides. However, in this instance, the lots are within what I would consider a node that kind of has an established character. There are within that area, from what I could see, 4 lots that already are smaller than what's proposed, and beyond that, the areas of land to the south, the east and the west are quite typically more open, and in my opinion that provides an element of balance. In terms of visibility, it will be difficult, and there'll be not too many areas where it'd be possible to see more than one dwelling on the site. So that would, in my opinion, mitigate potential effects of it would I guess would mitigate the rural lifestyle type character. It wouldn't appear obviously as a rural lifestyle type development. Overall, I consider that the proposal is not contrary to the objectives and policies of the district plan, nor any Otago regional policy statements. I also consider overall that the proposal will promote sustainable development under the Resource Management Act. I have some suggestions for some amendments to the conditions. Can we discuss that?
I can do that now.
Yeah, sure.
And then that way hear everything you've got to say that might answer some questions that we might have otherwise.
Sure. The draft condition 15 that related to the off-grid telecommunications, like to include in that lot 3 that this consent also provides for lot 3 to have wireless electricity.
So just so I've got this right, because that's under the heading prior to 224C certification.
That one is prior. So that would ordinarily be the point at which the power's provided, the underground power is provided to the sites. This is an alternative.
I guess I'm thinking that it's under the heading access, whereas I would have thought that telecommunications probably should be its own one, and then electricity should be its own one as well. Just me being pedantic about formatting.
No, that certainly should have another.
Its own. So I think 15 and 16 should be split between telecommunications and electricity, and just such. Yeah. Right. I think I know where you're going. That's the most important thing.
And further to that, there should also be an additional condition under the heading of to be included on a consent notice. Reason for this is to advise any future lot owner that there's non-wired telecommunications and that there isn't a reticulated supply of electricity available to lot 3.
Yep. Understand, thank you.
And I would, under the same heading, to be included on a consent notice, I would include another one, and this is sort of based on, I guess I'm relatively new to this organisation, and based on some consents I've seen since that time. I feel the nature of this development, it could benefit from a condition to provide advice around reverse sensitivity, based on the fact that future lot owners potentially could run into experiencing the effects of permitted and anticipated rural activities, would just provide advice for a future lot owners. They are actually purchasing in a rural environment and can expect additional effects such as, for example, frost bands and things that can occur in the rural environment.
I would assume that if we're with those changes and that one is that we probably should get them formally from you and give the applicant a chance to review them. Absolutely. By way of a minute. And is that the best way to do that, perhaps?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
Just mindful that you've added something about reverse sensitivity. The applicant may or may not have a response about that. That if we're going to do that, I'm not going to put them on a spot here now. But I'd rather have if we get to that stage we are reminded of grant consent, then we can get that covered off.
Sure.
Yeah.
From our point of view, we're happy for it to be minuted that we're comfortable with those reviews.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. That one.
I'm happy to
Pending seeing the wording. Yeah. Pending seeing the wording.
You might slip something in there. Go, I didn't mean that. It's not the intention, but I won't bind you to that at all. I think we do it properly just to make sure we get it right because, could even be something inadvertent. That wouldn't be the first time that's ever happened in a consent world, would it? Okay. Thanks, Tim. So you heard me ask the applicant about the issue around about the precedent in particular.
Yes.
And I've heard you say that there's a couple of lots that are smaller already. They seem quite historical.
Yes.
So I think, as in terms of those relevance, they probably predate our district plan, I'd imagine, and they're probably the remnants of something from a time when Martin was just in short trousers. Yeah. So I know what you say, but I think there's nothing of post our district plan in this area that would probably tick that box. Would that be a fair assessment from what you've seen?
I would have to say, having only been here for a couple of months, I don't have wide experience in the scale of what rural subdivisions mean.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's probably a bit unclear. So from your perspective as the 42A report writer, and if we were to get an application from, the properties to the anywhere around there that are currently around the 8 hectare mark, and said, well, here goes our logic for, do you think a case could be made for them to be made smaller as well, that less than the 2, less than the average of 8?
There's always potential for a precedent. However, in this instance, in my assessment, I've considered the nature of the development in terms of where the building platforms were going. And I think in most instances, you probably, particularly if it's flat and open, you wouldn't have the opportunity to mitigate building platforms that this particular site provides. And each rural subdivision is assessed on its merits, and those factors can be considered. Again, with that, I am coming back to some reliance on the landscape assessment.
So I guess what you're saying is that the way the subdivision has been proposed is that the issues around, from a landscaping perspective and that precedent perspective, saying that these are quite discrete lots that can set apart and won't appear to be to anybody observing a breakdown of the rural environment into a lifestyle blocks.
Yeah. I mean, there are some elements of it that I would consider to be relatively unique.
One of the questions from the panel was around notification to the affected parties. And if I read the Section 95 assessment, there was a determination made that there was no requirement for any other notification other than the parties that had provided the written notification, or for that matter, a wider public one.
Yes, well, I guess that came down to my effects assessment on those parties. In terms of visibility, if you're talking the properties to the north, they won't have any real clear views of the development. So from that perspective, won't be particularly discernible. Also, I guess potential effects from that kind of development could be lighting and noise. These things are partly mitigated by the separation distance. The building platforms themselves are located closer to the parties that have provided written approvals than those that haven't. And also there's a condition proposed, I think, on lighting as well, at the recommendation of Mr. Tyler.
Okay. I guess I'd make the observation that it's my expectation would have been there would have been a ring around all those properties, and they all would have had to require their provide their written approval, and then a Section 95 that didn't have that might have got to limited notification at least to those immediately adjoining owners. Notwithstanding what you said about the visibility and those things, my gut feel would say it's not just the visibility; it's about the sense of the neighbourhood and what's there and what you're used to. But it's not for me necessarily to question the validity of the Section 95 report. But I've got to say that I'm quite surprised that it was not at least limited notification to all of those people that are shown on the. Where did I see that? Yeah, figure 2 in your report. So I guess that those other ones that are the two properties in particular, the Maxwell property, and dare I say even the 185 that bounds onto it. But that's a decision that's been made, and I don't think the panel has any power to necessarily question that or not. I don't know.
It can factor into your decision making,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions for them? Yeah, we're missing technically in. Right. Dominic, anything from your point of view? Actually, this next question will involve you, and I was about to ask it. So I asked him, but he might go to you. So with the advice that's come from the environmental engineer, says that there's conditions around wastewater, water, all those sort of things. There's a whole lot of work the applicant will need to do to make sure that a wastewater system will comply, to make sure that the water is fit for purpose and of the right volumes. So they haven't come with the application, which often we do see, but in this case they haven't. So the conditions you're happy will cover those things, and the risk is for the applicant is saying your bore on lot 1 might be a fizzer for 3 lots to meet the requirements of the condition. And not suggesting it should be, but that's the risk you take. And then equally with the ground and the geology, it might be for wastewater disposals that might turn out to be in this rocky environment problematic. I know it shouldn't, but they are all things that. So am I right to assume that the conditions will cover it because the information hasn't come through? Yeah. So I guess I raise that because it does mean that you can do that work at the front end, or you do it at the condition end, and then you get a consent and go, oops, can't work because something has happened. We've got to come back for variation or whatever. So there's an element of risk. I wouldn't expect that would be a problem, but right, let's clarify that for me. Thank you. So the applicant has the right to reply. You might want to have a quick converse with your client, or you might sort of say, we're all set to go, up to you. Happy to give you some time.
Yeah.
So in response to the reporting planner's presentation, so yes, we recognise that condition 15 needs to be modified to accommodate, let's say, non-mains power for lot 3.
Yep.
I agree with that. The question about putting a consent notice on relating to reverse sensitivity. Reverse sensitivity is explored in the, let's say, analysis of the application, the location of the building platforms to the boundaries and potential primary production, and obviously the, let's say, possibly even in the land use of the surrounding properties. So my question is what potential for reverse sensitivity could actually occur, because a lot of those properties, the nature of the topography and productivity means they can't intensify. There's no water available and it's on quite challenging soils. So what I appreciate the council wants a belt and braces approach to this, but I do question whether reverse sensitivity is a real issue in this location.
I understand where you're coming from. I think the best thing to do is by way of a minute to put that to you and have those comments formally, and the panel can then decide either way about where it's going, and maybe with what Tim does include, you look at that, so that makes sense. I suspect part of it for me would be coming from the point of view is that this is becoming pretty lifestyle-y, and
certainly, yes.
And no matter what happens, it's what we don't know that could happen. That could be, you know, and the frost bans, those type of things. And you're not, if you're dealing with a rural bit of land that was 4 hectares, it was 8, average of 8 in the 2s, it wouldn't be the same issue. But I think with the size we're going to here, I think it's worth exploring that. So I hear what you're saying, but the belts and braces approach in these sort of cases is probably the best thing. There's too many examples of people coming here from somewhere else and saying, "Oh, I can't have that next to me." I'll give you a list.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think once you take a site visit, so the limitations of the surrounding land will become apparent. Yes.
Yeah. Anything else?
No. So thank you.
So the panel will undertake a site visit, and we will be looking very closely at the issue about the whole thing about the precedent and looking at the landscape side of things as well, to make sure that we can fully get our heads around how that works, and then assessing it back to the plan and the report. I just think this is probably, all my time on the panel, this is probably the most non-complying of the non-complying I've seen, to be perfectly honest. It's unusual. Doesn't mean it's wrong, it's just unusual.
And hence the vetting through the non-compliant process to assess on its merits.
Yeah. And so we'll certainly do that. Yes. Anything else I've missed? Anybody? No. Okay. The decision of the hearings panel is reserved. The formal decision will be in writing and will be available within the statutory period of 15 working days. In the event that the release of the decision is delayed, the applicant will be advised of the delay. The hearing is now adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Right, we'll resume the meeting of the Central Otago District Council hearings panel. We'll move to agenda item 24.10.3, which is an objection to a menacing dog classification. A report from Lee Webster that Lee will now take us through the key points, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is, as you say, is an objection to a menacing dog classification of the Dog Control Act, and I'll take the report as read, but just to highlight a few key elements insofar as very unique circumstances with regards to this objection. First and foremost, I'm sitting here in place of the reporting officer, Ryan, who was the animal control officer at the time, who's no longer working for the organisation. In addition to that, the owner of the dog that was classified as menacing regrettably passed away through the process in relation to the objection to the menacing dog classification. And so that objection has been picked up by the previous owner's daughter, who has requested that we follow through with the objection to that.
Ashley White is the previous owner's daughter.
That's correct. So in the circumstances in relation to the classification, which you have it in the first page of the report, following the classification, the previous owner, Mrs. Bain, had the dog Tyson desexed help towards the taking any aggression away from the dog. In addition to that, she also engaged the capabilities of a Mike Mitchell, who is an ex-police dog trainer, who then worked with Miss Bain to address some of the challenges that the owner had at the time with control. It's quite a large dog, and she was struggling with the control of that, which led to the circumstances or the classification in that first place. Having had a response from Mike Mitchell with regards to the work that he'd done with her and had continued to do with Ashley White, the objection to the classification then brought that to mind to say, well, okay, well, what has changed to change our viewpoint as an organisation to say, well, are the risks still there? And as a result of that, and working with Ryan, the animal control officer, who was satisfied himself as an ex-police officer working with dogs to see that the advances that have been made with the dog Tyson, the controlling of the dog, the desexing of the dog, he was satisfied, which I am following through with that, to say that we feel that the objection to the dog classification could be rescinded if you have a mind to do that. In addition to that, I'll just add to say that the current owner, which is Ashley White, is looking to rehome the dog. The rehoming of that dog would be outside of our district. And that's just a point for your information. It makes no relevance in relation to whether or not you uphold or rescind the classification. That's in the report as well, as to say, well, if you were of a mind to rescind the classification, we would simply notify the council to where the dog would eventually reside and make them aware of the history of that, of classification either being maintained or rescinded. And that information would also be updated on the National Dog Database.
Thank you. So my brief summary of what the report says is that the then owner, realised the dog was big and wasn't doing what it should be doing, got it desexed, got Mike Mitchell to start training it, and then the dog blotted its copybook. And I would have to assume that we've had dog-related matters before, but generally the dog's one that gets the penalty for the lack of control and or training of its owner. And despite the lady's best efforts, it didn't quite work on that particular occasion. But the reports are basically saying that with the further training and stuff that's happened, is that was probably a once-off. But these sort of dogs, I guess, need to be matched for the right sort of owner as well. And I get the impression that maybe Mrs. Bain wasn't sort of the right sort of person to own such a big dog. Would that be a reasonable observation?
That's a reasonable summation. And the dog control is quite unique insofar as if I'm an owner and I haven't upheld my responsibilities as an organisation, I could be disqualified from the ownership for a maximum of 5 years. The similar circumstances, the classification for a dog, which is for the lifetime of the dog.
So we rescind the menacing dog classification. We will, I assume if we did that, we would then make it a condition that said that we would advise the receiving authority of the dog situation. Does that stay with the dog? And does the next owner know about that?
No, it does not. So once that happens, if that dog was to be, the owner of the dog moved to another district again, the continuation of the awareness of that does not follow it. There's no mechanism within the legislation or within the National Dog Database to be able to record that information that then could be seen for any district across New Zealand.
And the process that made the dog menacing was, refresh my memory how that works.
So that was the incident taking place, the officer taking all of the information into consideration to make a recommendation to, it would have been to myself, but I wasn't, I was actually on annual leave when that recommendation came through for the classification. That went to the group manager for planning and infrastructure. She then signed that classification off, and so that maintains within an operational capacity, and then it's only when there's an objection to that that it gets raised to yourselves.
So now that the objection's been made, the officer that recommended the classification in the first place has said, I've heard your case.
Yep.
And I guess that's about how the process works. Unfortunately, you've got to do something to get it to that next level.
Correct.
And so Ryan, who's no longer with us, has said, I agree, what's being done is the right thing. That dog is not menacing, in my opinion, anymore.
Correct.
So the most important thing for us is saying that if we do make that decision to uphold it, that all the right things are lining up. Yeah, okay, cool.
Absolutely. Versus the actions being taken and the officer saying, actually, I'm still of a mind that that dog should still maintain its classification for reasons A, B, C, and D.
Where's the dog now?
The dog is currently in our district, but they were looking to move the dog to North Island.
Right. Ian, Martin, any questions?
It looks like it's one of those ones which has been actually resolved. The only query I had is, how do we know? Are we confident that the trainer, Mike, is what he said he was?
Yes, insofar, so when I've spoken with Ryan insofar as the details that we have, I certainly haven't questioned his credibility as a dog handler in the police previously. In linking in with Ryan with the conversation that he had, he gave me those assurances, and so I absolutely value that.
Ian?
Have there been any incidents since?
No, not whatsoever.
Sounds like, that's one of those classic cases of big dog, small person, inexperience. And shepherds are particularly notorious for, when they're young, for being loud.
Yes. Just a moment. I'm going to answer the question that you just raised about the dog man. Let me just check to make sure that's what I think it is.
Oh, you know who it is, of course.
Well, no, not of course, but I think I do. You should make sure it's the right one.
You know everybody in Pies and Mornings, don't you?
There's not in Pies and Mornings. Yep. Here's who he says he is. That's the Mike Mitchell I know.
Well, I'll move the recommendation then.
Right, hang on. Recommendation is
To rescind current classification of the dog as being.
well, I think it was well set out, wasn't it? Nice. So I'm going to say that. Yeah, so the recommendation, which is on Mike, so we recommend that we consider all the circumstances and we concur with the view of the reporting officer that the menacing classification be rescinded for the reasons stated. All right, I just think
So moved.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Above my pay grade.
Makes sense to me.
Now, and number two should be that if executive be requested to advise.
You can just direct myself.
I just would like it recorded in that's what we resolved.
You can resolve that the acting group manager for planning and infrastructure contact the
on the basis on the basis of the panel.
Acting group manager.
then I will contact the receiving authority.
Advise the receiving authority
Yes.
for the dog of the background and this decision.
And that's detailed in the following page of what you're just reading that recommendation from. The top, just above where it says attachments, saying that we would do that. It didn't name myself, but it said that we would do that.
Right. If we need to tie that up, we can. Leo will check the wording of that to make sure we get it right. Right, move Martin, seconded. Ian, all in favour? Aye. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good outcome. Dog not suffering because
very, very
circumstances.
Thank
you all. Cheers.